I assumed it was already on.
No, I never have to worry about that. So let me click one more button. Well, welcome to Canton Coders. Sellout house tonight, right, Camille? You should see the number of people here. We can't count it with 2 bytes, can we? That's a joke tonight.
More dad jokes.
More dad jokes. Anyways, we're Canton Coders. We're a nonprofit out of somewhere in Michigan slash Indiana slash the Midwest. We're here to help you. We don't care about your employer. We don't need your money. We run on story points and good wishes. Tonight, I'm joined by my friend Camille Bell as she does part two of the best behavioral driven development slash Gherkin slash other titles it's been called segment. We're going to post this on YouTube, so most likely you're watching this in a past tense, but either or, there's a link down here. If Slack is still a thing, we ask you to join. We're 100% free. We don't charge you any money. We don't sell your information. We just do this because this is the right thing to do with software developers is help each other get better. Anything else we should add to that, Camille? You sat through enough of these at this point.
Um, Participate.
Participate.
Yep. If you're on Zoom or if you're on Slack and want to send Joel some questions. Um, anyway,
Yep, and if you're currently watching on one of our streaming platforms, join our Slack in real time and join the Zoom because you're welcome here. Cool. Camille,
yeah,
you want to get started?
sure. Okay. Hello, welcome. I'm Camille Bell. I'm about to go share some slides and review what we did last time first, because this is a two-parter. Um, right, this is my messy desktop. And come here. Okay. So, this is given when Gherkin. We are going to be reviewing first what we did last time. Okay. No, before that, I guess I'll say something about me. I'm an agile coach. I've focused primarily in the technical arena, but I do other stuff as well. I've been in IT forever. Here's my information in how to get hold of me, and some of my presentations, LinkedIn, etc. So enough about me. What we talked about last time. First of all, we talked about the why, the who, and the what. Before we do specification by example, behavior-driven development, or whatever we want to call this thing, we need to know what we're building. And particularly why we're building it, who we're building it for, and what exactly we're building. Okay, so we talked about that and we went into some detail. If you haven't seen it yet, it will be on the prior video. Then we talked about what's called the 3 C's, a card, confirmation, and confirmation. That is, now that we have this thing, which I will call user story, and you may call a requirement, or you may call it George, we need to have this conversation about what we are building and how we can know that we actually built it right. That's our confirmation. And this down at the bottom is a real Gherkin. It's a real thing. And the other thing we talked about is when you do this, you want to get multiple points of view, often called the 3 amigos. It's a developer point of view, a business point of view, and a testing point of view. If you don't have formal testers, have one of your developers take that testing point of view. Okay, we also talked about, we started getting how we would break that into something which will eventually become Gherkin. That we now have a number of scenarios for our story. You can think of them as tests, like for instance, successful withdrawal, and that has to have concrete data. Very, very critical. Wonderful thing about it is that these things become executable. And we can very simply take that in a very structured format and turn it into a cucumber scenario. Cucumber is called different things on different platforms. Mostly it's called cucumber. In the C# world, it's called SpecFlow. I don't know why. I think Python calls it behave, but there are dozens of different language implementations. Last time we also talked about the fact that there is a business focused side, which is in plain English with some structure to it, which is what we're talking about. That's the Gherkin. And there was also a technical facing side where you have the underlying structure. I don't think we're going to have time to go into that tonight. We might do that in another episode. And here was your basic structure for how to put a Gherkin scenario together. We have this thing called a feature. It has keywords. Scenario, given, when, then. We talked about given, when, then a lot. That's your precondition, some type of event, and your postcondition. If you're developers, you may think of that as assemble, act, and assert. It's got different names in different languages, but that's the most common one that's used from Java. And some of this must be specified exactly this way. This part, I'm happen to use the user story format, but you can put any kind of text in here that's useful for explaining what this thing is about. Scenario, and that's our test title, our given precondition and our postcondition and our event or action. And we can add some various things with ands if we want to. Highly recommend not adding an and to a when, although it's legally allowed in Gherkin. You want to have that event be as unique as possible. Okay. All right. So here's an example of our cash withdrawal. As I say, this is could be in any structure, and it's critical to have our concrete data. So now that we know a little bit about what the structure of this should be, what are the qualities of really good Gherkin? Well, first of all, you want it to be in your business, or if you're in government, maybe warfighter, or consumer or client, whatever, the language that's natural to your domain. We'll talk a little bit about how that has to be structured. And it needs to be easy to understand. It needs to be unambiguous, very, very clear, with just the right amount of detail and absolutely concrete data that's relevant to your scenario, but not any extra stuff. We don't want it to be too technical or too scripty. Scripty is click here, hit this button, that one. Not too long, should be short. I've seen 100-line Gherkins. Absolutely no, don't want that. You want it to be reusable. Your steps you're going to want to reuse, and the correct use of given, when, then, and other keywords. So let's look at some examples of what not to do. Sometimes it's easier to understand what's good by seeing what's bad. So in this case, we've got something too vague. We have our scenario. It's a book search. It also should have feature, which is missing, but just for the scenario part that we're talking about here. So what kind of book search? Is it successful? Is it unsuccessful? What kind of thing are we looking for it by? What are we searching on? Author, title, ISBN, who knows? What kind of data are we looking for? How in the world are we going to know what book it is? And what's the appropriate information? What should we specifically see on our results? So way too vague. Now, this is not vague. So that problem's gone away, but now we've got stuff in here that is way too technical. You can see that we're talking about stuff that's inside a database, and those are some keys and foreign keys. That's the ID and the author ID. But way too much stuff. We're also talking about that the page should contain. We don't want to specify that. That assumes it's on the web. Often you'll want your Gherkin scenarios that you're running your tests to be below the browser. That you can write them to the browser, but you don't want too many of those. We want to follow the testing pyramid, which I mentioned in a previous discussion, which you can find on Canton Coders, about all the things about testing that they didn't teach you in computer science.
We'll put the link in the bio.
Okay, sounds good. Anyway, and you can see this web. Okay, so way too technical, not good. Now this is less technical. This is better. And it's not vague, that's good, but it's still too scripty because we're talking about the bookstore homepage and I'm filling in a search field and I click on search, too scripty. Okay, this isn't scripty and it does get information, but it's got more detail than we need. Yes, this information is probably in our database on publisher and ISBN, but we're not searching by publisher and ISBN. We're searching by author, and we're looking for a book title. So this information here is relevant to our and this one is not. So given that these are the authors, we don't really need to have the author repeated or what format it's in or what price. That doesn't mean that there might not be another scenario that you want to test for price. Are we pulling the right thing up? But we want to do those independently. Think of the way you do unit tests. You don't want a ton of different asserts. So this isn't bad, but the keywords are wrong. This will run. But this should be a when, because the point of having these keywords is not just that the Gherkin interpreter understands them and can create your tests and run them properly, but that human beings can also understand them. So this is the when, this is our action, and that should use the word when, but it doesn't. This is the and, that's an action. And it should specify that's not the action, that's the then part. That's our post condition. So that's what we're expecting. That's what would be equivalent to an assert in a unit test. So now we have something that's a lot better. In our successful book search by author, we have just the right amount of information that we know. We're searching for Morgan, and we should only find cucumber and cheese in the results. This is a book written by a fellow called Jeff Morgan, whose nickname is Cheesy. I do not know why. I have worked with the man, but he has never told me why that's his nickname.
Camille, I think we got a question, and Chris, feel free to just.
Oh yeah, you have to pop in for questions. What's your question?
Yeah. So what happens when the business comes back and says, well, I do want to see, cucumber and cheese with the price and the format and, these 20 other details?
We break them into separate tests.
Okay.
We break them into separate scenarios. You do not, like with your unit tests, you don't want one test to be dependent on another. In this, as a matter of fact, testing in general follows a similar sort of structure. We want to test for one thing at a time. And in general, the way Cucumber and the other tools work is they will run your tests like JUnit, etc., in random order. The exception to that is SpecFlow. the default for the C# implementation is to run everything in the exact order. So there's a way to change that so that it runs it randomly, which you want to do. If you're in the C# environment, and Joel, since you are,
I love C#.
You can probably go dig into that and give some folks some information on a link on how they can fix their spec flows so that it runs in random order. That is Joel's homework. Haha.
And there's a gentleman named Bob Allen in our community that loves spec flow too.
Okay, maybe Bob can put this in.
But we will do that. We will put that in the bio down low. By the way, if you have questions, just feel free to blur them out. Reminding you, we are streaming this on the internet right now. So if you don't feel comfortable identifying yourself, leave your camera off, stay on mute, and drop your questions in a chat window, and Nick or I will pick it up. Nick just got a job he didn't know he had.
All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do an exercise. So I'm going to ask you all to participate and turn your mics on. We're going to look at some Gherkin examples. Some of these are examples of good Gherkin, and some of them are examples of bad Gherkin. Okay? The bad example problems that we'll see is things that are too vague, too technical, too scripty, too detailed, or it's missing a keyword, or the keyword is misused. And there may be more than one problem in this. Okay. Sound good?
How many story points do we get if this works?
As many as you want.
And also my Scrum Master wants to know how many story points this is going to cost us.
I'm going to ignore that. Okay. All right. So this is our first exercise. All right. Online shopping. Is this good Gherkin or bad Gherkin?
Bad.
Okay, what's wrong with it?
It's too vague.
Yep. Right, you are. How about this?
Scripty.
Yeah.
How about that? Yeah.
That's scripty. That's exactly what the problem with this one is. It's discussion on being the home page, typing into a search field, the click button, very definitely too scripty. How about that one? By the way, at the time of creating this, those were actually the right numbers. I live in Maryland.
Incorrect.
What was that?
It seems fine. Yeah, I don't know. This seems okay, except for that some really weird tag tools there. Yeah. Actually, no. This actually it is correct. Like I think 6% of 50 is free, right?
Yep, that's good. This one is good. This one is okay. You know, maybe we could have a little verbiage here, but that's not absolutely required. That's optional. How about that one?
Wrong verbiage. Yeah.
Where is it wrong and why?
I think the end, you know, that there's two extra ends. Probably one of them should be thin, and then like maybe then I think those are thin, right?
So yeah, so this line here where it says and I should receive $150, that should be a then. These are our expected results. So this one should be a then, and that sort of keys you into knowing that the other and is related to that. It's not, those are not part of the wins. They are not part of the actions. They're part of the expected results. Okay. How about this one?
I think it's a little vague. Not-
What part's vague?
It's like should see my confirmation quickly. What does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
getting a
So
feedback?
what are we talking about? We're talking about an hour, a microsecond, how many seconds? And this is something that you can put in with some concrete information. This is something that you should be talking to your business people about. It's going to differ depending on what kind of audience you have. So unfortunately, it's a true thing that if you have a captive audience, that is, they can't go to another product because it's an internal in-house application that you're writing, it can take longer and you can still keep them. However, it probably shouldn't take longer. And if you have any kind of competition in the world, people get really frustrated and move on to using another app if they don't get a reasonably quick one confirmation. So you and your business folks and somebody probably in marketing should figure out what that needs to be and have this one where it can actually run and check how long it takes to do this. Okay, so absolutely right there. Okay, how about this one?
Well, it doesn't have a feature.
Yep, that's one of the things that's wrong with it. It needs feature. Will not run without that.
It has a poor selection of music too.
It was intended to be eclectic.
You've probably got a couple of extraneous columns there. Probably don't
Mhm.
need that.
We
Yeah.
have a fresh graduate asking what a CD is.
Um,
I was being sarcastic, Camille.
Thank you. Yes, so this is, it's missing feature and it's too detailed.
Mm.
All righty. How about this one? And you may need to move if you're showing up with hello. Let's shrink this a second so I can see. So how about our using Ajax situation?
Two scripty.
Well, so you'd think so. And in most cases, it would be. But this is one of those rare exceptions where what we're doing is we're checking, this assumes that in order to learn how to test Ajax as a student, I want to practice Ajax testing. And in the practice of that, I actually need to test Ajax itself. So this is something that I'm actually doing with the browser. And I actually want to see these messages and so on. And that show the pop. So this is a rare case, and there are some rare cases where the script matters. There's also an interesting situation. So the first two you can see are about using pop-ups. The last one is on a totally different application on the world population page. And you can see it doesn't have the concrete data you normally would expect. Why do you think that? Any guess?
Well, it's making the assumption that the world population is always increasing, but maybe it changes over time. You don't know exactly how much it's going to increase.
Yes, that's exactly the case. And I don't think even during COVID that the population decreased. So the only way we can test this is to, use Ajax to capture the dynamic information at one point in time of what the world population is, and then immediately go capture it again. And it will be, and then we will check whether it's greater. And that's the only way so this is an exception to the usual rule if we don't want any scripty stuff. Okay. All right. Say, escape, stop sharing.
And if you're watching on
Stop
LinkedIn,
sharing.
if you're watching on LinkedIn, which I know we have a lot of people watching on LinkedIn, feel free to join our Slack right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Link is down here.
So now I need to go find my slides again. Excuse me, and share them.
And we're doing this live, right, Camille?
We're doing, yes, we're doing this live, which is always so much fun when all of a sudden.
Yep. While we're waiting.
There we go. Okay, I'm back to being able to find my stuff. All righty.
We're coding. We're filling time until Camille can get the PowerPoint back up.
Okay, Camille now has the PowerPoint. All right, yes. Okay, so we just did that.
Do you want to share your screen maybe?
Oh, yeah, it would be a good idea. Let me share my screen. That would be helpful.
Nick, that was your job.
Yeah, it is my job to share my screen.
But Nick was supposed to remind you.
Thank you.
Oh, well, next time. Yeah.
We're losing,
Okay.
you lose 10 story points.
Okay. So,
Damn.
big screen. So everybody can see my messy screen again, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so now let's go move this out of the way. And current slide. Okay, move that out of the way so I can actually see stuff. All right. Okay, so we just did this. We just did this exercise. And now we're going to look at some more complicated Gherkin, and with it some more interesting anti-patterns. But there's one thing I want to throw in here. Bob mentioned it last time that we hadn't discussed a rule, and I promised him that's Bob Allen, that we would discuss it this time. And that is this is an optional way to group scenarios together. Now, for instance, on the last thing that we just saw about Ajax, you notice the first two were dealing with pop-ups, and they were dealing with a standard Google example of pop-ups that it has. And the last one was on the population page, on the world population. So we could have used a rule to logically group those together. Sometimes it can just be to make it more useful to understand what goes together. And sometimes we'll see in a moment that there are things that we can use that for. To take advantage of new Gherkin keywords and features that we haven't used yet. So what's wrong with this specification by example, behavior-driven development, whatever we want to call it? What's wrong with this?
It's 2 steps, isn't it?
Well, these are the steps. It's actually 6 steps. But you're on the right track.
Is it technically 2 different scenarios?
Yes, it's two different scenarios. Remember, we want our tests to be separate. And there's even a kind of a clue here as we've got two thens, two whens, etc. This should be a given. So we basically have, this is our an example of a scenario that's too long because it's multiple scenarios. And as is common in that case, we've misused a keyword. So how do we fix that? Well, we fix it by making it two scenarios. Okay, given I need to have a change for one. Now, you'll notice that I'm using the word sense here in both cases instead of sent and sense. There's a reason for that. And the reason is, so that's not the ideal English, but when these are our steps, okay? This is our scenario, and our givens, our whens, our thens, and our ands are all steps. When that gets turned into what we call step definitions, that's the technical side that's either written in Java or C# or Python or Ruby or what have you. The wording needs to be identical. So that's why the English is a little strange here. Okay. So this fixes it into having two different ones. And ideally, this will be run and you don't know which order the scenarios will be run in. Okay. So like with your N units or J units or R specs or whatever, they should be run randomly. Now, here is another example of something that's way too long and has too many steps. And you can see that there's only one when, then, but still, we're doing different things here. We have one piece of this that's looking at how we log in. We've got another piece of this that's looking at what happens with the credit scores once we're logged in. You want to separate things like that out. So here we've separated out the maxing out the cards part. And in the real world, we are going to have to mock certain pieces of this out because in the real world, credit bureaus only update their credit reports once a day. And we don't want our tests to take multiple days to run. But at least you get the concept of that this part is dealing with, and we haven't defined what maxing out all the credit cards are, but that at least we've pulled this out and we could probably make it better. And we'd have another piece looking back there that deals with logging in. Now, this works, but you'll notice that our wording is different. So this isn't reusable. And we want to make our wording identical. This is something that you're going to need to have a discussion when you're, and this is a reason that I like to have a three amigos, not just the business people writing it, or not just the testers writing it, or not just the devs writing it, but everybody getting together and having, you know, a solid thinking on how do we want to word this stuff, because this might well be the way that business folks would write them, and they write them in different times. And somebody is going to know, either a dev or a tester, that, hey, last time we wrote it using this wordage, we should use the same one the next time. Because otherwise, when I have what are basically 4 steps, but with different data, here, that I would instead get 8 different steps that are implemented, and you don't want to do that. So how do we fix it? Well, we fix it by agreeing on what the words are. So now it's common. My checking account has a balance of, instead of saying in one case it has a starting balance, in another case saying it has a balance. When I attempt to withdraw, and you could just say when I withdraw, but whatever, when I attempt to withdraw, instead of saying one case I withdraw and the other case saying I attempt to withdraw. And there could be a reason for saying I attempt, because you might have another test where you try and withdraw more money than there is. And again, that I should receive, as opposed to saying that this should be dispensed and I should receive. Just agree on what the words are. And again, ending balance and new balance, we've just changed it to new balance. So really important to have the words be identical. Now, this is not going to be obvious initially if you haven't worked with Gherkin, that this isn't reusable. Standard stoplight colors, I think throughout the world, is that we have red, yellow, and green. Red is stop, yellow is that we should start thinking about stopping, and green is that we can go. And the standard transition is that we move from yellow to red, and from green to yellow, and from red to green. But instead of having just basically 4 statements here, 4 step definitions, we have a number more, because while you and I can tell that yellow is a keyword and that it's a parameter here, rather not keyword, these are the keywords, the given, the and, the when, the then, the scenario, feature, etc. The computer can't. So our solution for this, now you saw with earlier ones that we had $signs, and this will depend on your implementation of Gherkin, whether or not $sign is it is in the Ruby version, but I believe in some other versions you have to have the word dollar instead. Okay, but in this case, this won't work at all. And our solution is simply to stick it in quotes. So now that we've stuck it in quotes, we only have 4 steps. Okay. Now we fixed it. It only has 4 steps, but there's an awful lot of duplication here. And maybe with 2 or 3 of them, that's not too bad, but you can imagine other situations where you're testing a whole bunch of things and there's more than those 3 options. So there's this thing called scenario outline. And it's a slightly different structure here. We have our feature and we have our user story or other text as we had before. This time, instead of saying scenario, we say scenario outline. And we think about some sort of theme. For instance, we could have had in our example where we were looking at Ajax, we could have had a pop-up theme and a world population theme, and we could have separated those out as themes. Actually, that would be more rules, so excuse me there. But in this case, what is the thing that we have in common here? Well, in common, what we have is stoplight transitions, okay? And that we have given, when, then, maybe with some ands in it, maybe not. And we have a variety of input parameters. And then we have our post condition. We have some sort of event in our post condition. And we might have an and, not too many, and our post condition parameters. By the way, the structure of this with the greater than, less than signs and the underscores is critical. That's the way Gherkin knows. And you don't have to have these bars perfectly lined up, but it does make it a whole lot more readable. So then we use the examples and we can run those. So this is how we would convert this to that. Where what we're doing is we're switching our colors on stoplights. We have a starting color and we have an ending color. Yellow to red, green to yellow, red to green. Okay. Now, here's another case of duplication. Slightly different. That all of these are identical. In this case, the given, a when, and the then, and the beginning, the given and the and the first half of the when are all identical in this case. So there's another thing, it's called background, that we can use. So we can pull out a common given with maybe an and sometimes, not often, but there's a when that might be a common. It will be in our case here. And then we have a number of scenarios that go with that, where the other parts of the steps are unique. And usually the when is unique, but in our particular case, here it isn't. So here, the given, I've been issued a new card. When I insert that card with the correct PIN and I choose that, that applies to both scenarios. Now, the last anti-pattern I want to talk about is file organization. So when you are creating a Gherkin file, where should you put it?
In Git.
Yes, exactly. In Git or whatever your tool is that you use to store your code, because Gherkin is code. And very commonly, you will find, particularly in large companies that like to use agile project management tools, whether they be Rally or Jira or version 1 or what have you, they will ask you to put it in that tool. Okay. Now, the problem with that is that all of these tools are organized by time. They're time boxed. Okay. You've got sprint 1 or iteration 1, whatever you want to call it, followed by 2, followed by 3, followed by 4, etc. But that's not a good way to organize your Gherkin. You want your Gherkin organized by common functionality so that you can find things, so that you can see where something you might reuse, not have to go look through your entire project management tool. Moreover, it's real code, so it's got to be executed. What this means is that if you are in a large company where they've got separate testers or BAs or what have you, those people need access to your code repository, or you need to have a dev pair with them and work with them in the code repository. Anyway, okay, so the good organization is that we put it in the code repository, which is our system of record, and we organize it that way for our specification by example or behavior-driven development or whatever we want to call it. And that it's organized by business functionality, not by time. Again, that'll be simpler. So think about if you had a music collection, you might organize it by genre. You might organize it by artist. You would not organize it by the date you bought it. Okay? Or if you had books, on a bookshelf, if you were organizing them, they would not be organized by the date you bought them. Put the agile management tool would be equivalent to organizing it by the date you bought it. Okay, so now we're going to go look at another exercise. And we're going to look at some examples. And there are going to be some good examples and there are going to be some bad examples. So again, we're going to have the option of it being too vague, too technical, too scripty, too detailed, keywords missing, or steps that are keywords missing or misused. But now we're also going to look at things that are too long, or either because it's got multiple scenarios or just plain too many steps and probably should be broken into multiple scenarios. That's usually not reusable because the wording needed to be identical, but it wasn't. Not reusable because you needed to put quotes around things. That it had duplication, but was otherwise reusable, or there was just plain bad file organization. And like before, there can be more than one reason for something not being good. So we're going to go now on to our next exercise. Okay, goodbye Gherkin exercise 1, go to Gherkin exercise 2. Okay. And we will share that. Okay, play from current slide.
And Camille, we've added people to the audience. Just want to remind them to come
Oh.
off mute and shout it out.
Yeah, excellent. So here is our first situation. Is this good Gherkin or bad Gherkin? And if it's not good, why? If it is good, why?
There should be different scenarios. There's more than one scenario here.
Yep.
Did you read the whole thing or just look at the length of it?
It's also too long.
Yes. So too long often means multiple scenarios.
It is too long, but it's also using the keyword given multiple times, which is a key there for there's multiple scenarios.
Kind of a dead giveaway, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. How about this one?
Too vague.
Okay.
How much money am I transferring?
It's vague. There's no concrete data.
The bank seems suspicious too.
What's that?
The bank seems suspicious too. Are the FDIC insured?
Good question. Okay. How about that one?
Another duplication in the givens.
Yep. We've got some duplications in the givens, so we could put that in a background, perhaps.
I mean, overall, they look pretty good to me so far.
Well,
I think there's too much detail, then the page should be displayed.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
To me, that harks to implementation detail as well. So I don't
Yeah.
know. We could probably live without that.
Mm-hmm.
You architecture anarchist.
Okay. There's
Watch
one.
it.
There's at least one other thing here.
The page should be redisplayed as kind of, I think that's too implementation specific.
Yeah, that's too implementation specific. That's true.
Well, and then shouldn't the and I should see all that be in quotes after that?
Absolutely. Yes. So the end I should see this part. Whoops, hello. That's not what we were trying to do. The end I should see the cards must be 6. This should be in quotes because this is an error message that should be displayed. Okay. So, great. All right. How about this one? And as you're seeing my eclectic interest in music.
Too scripty again.
It's too scripty.
I love the
Yeah, you
jQuery
can-
specification or whatever that is.
That's part of the too scripty.
Yeah. All right. Oh, we don't need those IDs. You can get rid of those.
Yes, so it's too technical.
Mm.
We do not need the keys and the foreign keys in this. We really
Mm.
don't.
And
Uh,
I would say the dev.music, dev.album, unless that's a band.
I know it's not a band. It's a
You never know.
It's an element.
yep, it's an element. So
I think a business person would have trouble, or like a product owner or stakeholder would have trouble understanding this because click.
I think you're right.
But I've worked with
Element,
some software
yeah.
managers that would do this.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, oh no, for sure. No, I think, man, back at our old,
One was named Mark
shared
H.
client, I've seen these almost exact tests. Wait, what?
One was
Okay.
named Mark.
Yeah.
Sounds like an inside joke.
Well, Mark's talking.
Oh, okay. How about this one?
Hate that feature name.
Yeah, that's not a good one. Also, there isn't like, well, no, there's data here.
It's very tautological.
Tautological.
You use the word order in database, which is confusing. There's a context switch.
Uh-huh.
Didn't think about
I
that.
don't know. I think I'd rather use a flat file here, not a database. So
Well,
Do you know how many orders you have?
That was what I was. That first one has no like data to it at all.
yep. It
I
doesn't.
wish I could say I've never seen a gherkin like this before in my career. It's I mean, it's not testing, at a user acceptance level.
Right.
This looks like someone's trying to test a repository or database.
That's
connector.
exactly what it's doing. This is probably something that you'd be using. This is more an integration test, if you would. Now you can use Cucumber and Gherkin for that, but it's really not a specification by example. Now, assuming that we actually did want to test the database, we could put a rule in here between the first and the second scenario. And then we could take at least no, that probably wouldn't help much anyway. So something of a mess. But if they given I have an order for something could be specified better. But it's mostly okay, but there is only reason it might be okay is that we're actually trying to test a database. But again, this is not something that you'd want with your business folks. This would be something as an integration test.
And there's no logic, like, or update a record named Donald Duck, expect to see Donald Duck. There's no logic there, right?
Nope.
And it's
there's no
not just like
business
about
logic.
integration. I
We're
mean,
gonna-
I've seen this with APIs, right? Where, what's that? I'm sorry.
I wasn't saying anything. I was listening to you.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's standard crud, right? But like,
It is standard crud.
If we're doing standard CRUD, we probably don't need Gherkin. But I've seen this in APIs,
Mhm.
right? Especially when you're quote restful, because then you get these CRUD and it becomes very, when I submit a request, I get a success. And it's like, what do you mean by success? Like, what do yeah.
Okay. All right. So definitely not a business level scenario. If this belongs in Gherkin, questionable. How about this?
Too long.
Okay. Yeah. That's a nice start. What else is around?
I go back to your Sparrow deck talk.
Mm-hmm. Well, so what's typically, when something's too long, what's typically one of the problems?
Well, is this really all registration? I mean, this seems like another scenario. This seems like another case of multiple scenarios.
Yes, it is a case of multiple scenarios. That's absolutely true. What else is wrong? So we've got two things. It's too long. It's got multiple scenarios.
Any steps?
What's that?
Too many steps?
Yeah, it's too many steps, but that's part of being too long.
There's actually two hashtags saying like there's a medical checkup and personal detail. Like this person is pretty much saying that there's other scenarios, but they just don't want to write the other scenarios.
So, yeah, there's all of these things here, but there's sometimes we have something we're checking against, and other times it's just kind of vague. So what about this? Given I navigate to myapp.com.
Too scripty, isn't it?
Yeah, it's too scripty.
Wouldn't you put
And
like
the
on the
user-
login?
Yeah, the user forcibly clicks on gender mail.
I was wondering
So
what the forcible
scripty, but
click is.
weird.
Well, that's better than a double click. That's when you're pound your trackpad.
Okay, so lots wrong with this one. How
So
about
as a
that?
rule of thumb, maybe you might have already talked about this, so sorry, but if I see the filling of data and the submitting of data, I would usually group under one action.
Yep.
Um,
So you want to oops, nothing. So where were we? Yes, we were here. So you want to break this into multiple parts. Logging in, submitting some data, checking what it is. So lots of scenarios. Okay, how about writing our comments to the blog? What do we see here?
Duplication.
Yes. What could we do about that duplication? Where do we see the duplication?
In the givens.
Huh?
The whens are almost all the same.
Tableize it.
I mean, this would be what do you call it? The background. You would have a
Background.
background for this.
Exactly. Background. So background's needed for this. And that's the major thing.
Yeah, the first two lines are always the same, aren't they?
The first
Given
three are
and the
always
and.
the same.
Yeah.
Now, you will notice that although the first three lines are the same, that the then is different in all of them. And what this does, after we put it in background and get that other stuff out of that, is it makes it separate tests. So that we test for whether it's empty comment, we test for whether, we've got an error message, we test for a couple of different things. Do I have that in twice? Anyway, I will have to double check on that. How about this cash withdrawal?
Different wording.
Yes, exactly. That's the problem with this one. It's different wording. How about this one?
Is it? Go ahead.
What's that?
I mean, the starting balance is a parameter, right? Why aren't there? Well, I guess they're putting their detail in the examples.
The details in the examples.
Yeah. Okay.
That's exactly what's happening here.
Okay.
So is this, do we see any problems or is this good?
I think we're all scared to say it's good. So I think Nick should say it's good and then find out if he's right or wrong.
I'm struggling to find an error with this.
Actually, the last scenario isn't that seems suspiciously similar to the first and the second one, isn't it? Like,
Well, there's a slight difference in the second, you're talking about here, the multiple withdrawals.
yeah.
Okay, so what we're checking here, and the reason it's not in this is that we're checking because the first time through, we're checking that it's updating quickly. Okay, because I'm withdrawing $20, that ought to be okay. I'm going to have $80 left. Now I'm trying to withdraw $100. Now that shouldn't be okay. So $0 should be dispensed, and I should get this error message, which is very, very too much rude. And your business or product people or BA or whoever is representing that side of the house would notice that that was too rude and it should be changed. But it is a little different because sometimes it's important to check that if I do something and I do something again, it noticed and it's updating things correctly. So that's why this part here is not just when I withdraw $120.
I
They
mean,
seem like separate transactions to me, but I don't know. It's a different interface, I guess.
Well, one thing here is that sorry, but you're broke is not like that one's manually written at the very bottom. So if somebody decides to change the message, it's um,
If
oh,
you, if you change the message, then you will need to change the tests.
yeah, you have to change in 3 places, right? But I mean, if somehow they were able to get it in one place, I mean, it's the same alert, right? So
Well, so there are different thoughts about testing. And if I were writing a unit test, I would probably pick up that message from some sort of table that I had, so it was easy to change. And maybe you might do that in your Gherkin. But the most important thing about Gherkin, and this is more important that they're not in, it's more important than not having duplication, is that it be readable. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's okay to have duplication if it makes it more readable than if you don't. So usually I like to have error messages explicitly in my Gherkin. Whoops, whoa, we're not supposed to be there yet. Hello, let's go back to.
Did we get all the answers now?
I have them.
Now we're gonna have to send our certifications back, Nick.
Yeah.
We'll be Gherkin certified at the end of this.
Okay. So
The
I have the
representative
Gherkin
will be visiting you
certification.
soon.
Sorry about that. So the last thing here I have for you, unless you want to talk about this some more, but I think we're done talking about this. Anything else?
I'm done.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, sorry, but there's a typo with the capital B there.
Oh, good point.
I
Yep.
thought that was part of one of the mistakes, but I think I'm being pedantic.
So this is probably something that your business person, besides saying, hey, you know, that this is really too rude, we should say something else. We should let them know that they don't have any money in the sufficient money to do that. So, you know, insufficient funds might be a more polite way to say it, but they would probably also notice that, yeah, the grammar has problems.
I know, dude, you're broke. I'd rather go, dude,
I think
you're
I'd
broke.
send it over to legal myself, and we'd have to wait 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, I've had that problem. I've
They would
had
come
that
back
problem.
with funds insufficient.
I've had the challenge where the Spanish webpage and the English webpage were translated by somebody clearly in legal. And it was absolutely terrible Spanish, and they wouldn't let us fix it. What's wrong with this?
It's in Jira.
Yep.
Oh, wait, that was my sarcastic remark.
No, that's absolutely, that is the big problem with this. And it would be just as bad if it were in Rally or version 1 or some other tool.
And there's no
This is
story
why-
points on it.
This is, by the way, I screen captured a description in Jira of what you're supposed to do. So this is my recommendation of what not to do, because this should be in your code repository. It's got some other issues. It's a little scripty and stuff like that. But the big thing I wanted to point out is what Joel immediately jumped on. And I don't think this is Joel, that it's just because it's not your company's tool.
Oh, I don't care about my company's tool. I'm just saying it's Jira.
I was gonna say, is this a user story? Because if it is, it's terrible.
As a developer, I don't want any of the tools.
No.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a poor user story to start with. But in addition, the major thing is that it shouldn't be in an Agile project management tool. It should be in your code repository.
And I don't see story points listed here. I don't know how I will ever estimate.
Okay.
I'm
I'll
going
move
to
on
cut
from
them a
that
bit.
one.
Honestly, I'm going to cut them a bit of slack. If we want to start there and document it there because we don't have it in code repository yet, I'm okay with it.
Progress, right?
Uh-huh.
Even if you're doing the right things in the wrong spot, it's better than doing nothing.
As long as you get to the
Okay.
right spot. Yeah, that's fine.
So here's a checklist to kind of get started on thinking about things. And you can also, of course, review this presentation, and there's lots of other information out there. There's some good books, by the way. Specification by Example is one of the good ones. There is the Cucumber book that is focused on Ruby, but the general information is good. There's also a Cucumber for Java book. I haven't seen a Cucumber for SpecFlow. That goes into some details, which we have both of those, which we haven't gone into, and that is how do we turn these step definitions into, or rather, how do we turn these steps into step definitions that can actually talk to the back end code that we have, or sometimes the front end code, depending on how you're doing it. Cucumber and Cheese, which uses the Ruby version of Cucumber, is a really nice step-by-step description, except when it gets to the one use on Ajax, if I remember, because the example they're using doesn't exist anymore on Google's website. If you're interested, I have one that does work, or at least it worked last I saw it. So generic checklist, scenarios, BD, behavior-driven development, whatever you want to call it. They need to be clear, unambiguous, concrete examples. Given when, then, and other keywords need to be used correctly. They need to be short. So I like to strive for less than 10 lines. If it's 20 lines, that's really too long. I think more than 10 is generally too long. Needs to be that we did see one example that I think might have been more than 10 that I showed you from the Fannie Mae mortgage calculator, but it was close to 10. That's earlier in the presentation. That's a real example, by the way. Not at least the application is real, and the scenarios with the details are real. Needs to be business focused. That is not scripty, technical, or too detailed. Spelling, grammar, spacing, and wording needs to be consistent. Oh, and there's another gotcha, which I think has been improved in the more recent versions of Cucumber, SpecFlow, Behave, and their Gherkin, which is that sometimes you will run into a problem. It's not really how that you're writing it wrong. It's a limitation in the tool that if like the first 5 words are not unique, or maybe it's the first 7 if they've improved it, it will think that it's the same step definition as another one that has variations toward the end. So that's something just to be careful about in the tool. I think that has been improved since the last time I saw it. It may not have been. Earlier versions, certainly it was a problem. But in any case, the spelling, grammar, spacing, wording needs to be the same for the same thing. Organize them so that they've got related functionality and put them together, and not too many scenarios in a single Gherkin feature. Create separate features for them. And I think, yep, I think that's it. Any questions? If we have some extra time and you want to, I think I may show you an example of what it looks like when you turn them into step definitions from steps. Questions?
So I guess since I've never seen how it really works then, so the software takes the scenarios and everything and actually turns that into code.
Okay, so I will share this with you. Let me get
Show the
out of
magic.
this. Yep, well, I'm not going to do it live, but I will show you some examples. Hang on a second.
Camille has
Okay,
decades
hang
of
on.
presenting. That's why she's not doing a live code demo. She knows what will happen.
Yeah, well, I know people of, so one of the things that's Cheesy Morgan, as I was mentioning, does amazing live code demos.
Are you sure they're live or not recorded videos?
I get fumbled fingers. No, I've seen him do plenty of live ones. Let's see, where is that? Show recent. Let me look for it because I've got a nice example somewhere. File, open recent. I think it's in here. Yep. Let me look. Okay. So. All righty. We've seen this bit and that bit. So how does this bit get turned into? So when you run, for the first time you run your feature online, it will create, and this is what a step definition looks like when it's put together. Now this happens to be a Ruby example. It will look a little bit different in Java or another language. And this is what it looks like when you actually run it. So in this case, when you see it, if you're running it on the command line, and depending on your computer, on a Mac, you don't need to do anything special to turn on the color coding. You do if you're running it on a Windows machine, at least last I looked. This indicates that the first 3 steps have been run. This one has not. This one has actually failed. So how do we get from there? And this is the code that would be under test. Again, this is a Ruby example. How does that happen? Okay. So in our cash withdrawal example, we've got these steps. They are unimplemented. I'm running them from the command line to kind of show you what would happen. And this is the first half of what you see. Now you see this part where it says you can implement these step definitions from these snippets. These are the snippets that it gives you. And again, this is the Ruby version, but it'll be really similar in any other programming language you're giving. And this is a regex that it will show. This is how it tells it apart. And then it will give you this pending keyword temporarily. And that's where you're going to stick your code in. And when it has an argument, as it's automatically new because we had a $, or if it sees numbers, or if you have something that's a string, it will like do arg1, whatever. You're going to need to change that to something, obviously. So this is what it would look like. Okay, so our first step is I've changed arg1 to starting balance, and the next one I've changed to withdraw, and then I've changed to dispense. And I still have these pending steps. Okay, so now it says that this is pending. And this light blue here are steps that have been skipped. Now I've implemented my first one. This is, I have an account class that was created, and it has a starting balance. And I'm taking this, and this is something that's important because everything that it's sending you here is in a string form. Okay. Now it knows, going back here, to take the $sign out. Okay. And that's a number, but it's not sending you a number as an integer. Oh, it's sending you it as a string. So in whatever language you're doing, when you take that and you implement it as stating my given, okay, so I've got my account, I'm making a local variable here called my FM Fannie Mae Credit Union. And I'm taking this to making it 2 integer. Okay. So now if I'm following the BDD pattern, which is that I've written my test before I've written my code, that now goes red because there's no account. So now I create an account class. Again, this is a Ruby example, but again, different language. And it has, I've initialized it, which is your constructor. And it has this thing called opening deposit. And now that I've done that, now that line goes green. So now the when I withdraw $20 is pending. And this cycle repeats. So I start with some small piece of functionality we'll call a user story. I write a scenario for that. This is under this bigger thing called feature. And I create those step definitions, or I create the steps. So the scenario has the steps. And then from that, I have this step definition from the snippets, which just has this pending stuff. Then I turn that pending stuff into the code. If I'm following a behavior-driven development model, which I recommend, you watch it fail. And then we make it pass by evolving the code. Are there any more pending steps? If necessary, we keep going. If no, then we're done with the scenario. And that's basically how it works. And I don't have the demo ready for you. I can do a demo at a different time if you'd like.
No, that's cool. Thank you.
Okay, so that was a little extra I wasn't planning to do tonight, but there we are. Any other questions?
I do have a statement to make. If you go to the
What's that?
youtube.cantoncoders.org, I created a Camille Bell playlist. I know Camille. You're probably the
Thank
person
you.
that probably shouldn't watch it, but Camille has wonderful talks. This one won't be posted probably for a few days since it's gonna be four hours of rendering and my CPU is not that fast. A video. But I would say if you like this, check out our Camille Bell playlist where you can learn things like sparrows and what college didn't teach you about testing, and some of the history of computing where she doesn't even know where you took clips of things she shared because 2-minute bites shared a lot of knowledge. But any other questions? And I'll be happy to stop streaming so we can just chat like we normally do. If there's not any more questions you think future people in a year would like, be happy to wind it down and thank Camille officially.
It's a statement. Thanks, Camille. Thanks for that presentation. Thank you.
Well, you're most welcome.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording here. If you want to join our community, we're absolutely free. Nick, have we ever taken $1?
No, 50 cents. That's the money.
We've never taken any money. We don't need money. What we need is people that want to be happy in life and somehow, remotely, are working near code. We're not too particular. So please join the community, slack.cantoncoders.org. We have a span of reach of thousands, and we just want to help more people. So come join us, reshare, retweet, or whatever the new social media thing is. And thank you. What were you gonna say, Nick? You do a TikTok dance?
No. I thought we don't trade in dollars. We only trade in story points, right?
We run on story points, and please donate those.